This is a special presentation for the Believe in Pro Wrestling podcast. Here's Rick Ucchino on the Believe Podcast Network.
Welcome back to Cincy 360 here on ESPN 1530. Rick Ucchino tagging in for Tony Pike just for a few minutes. He'll be back, getting back to the Reds and Bengals conversation. Obviously, UC Bearcats. It's a big week. Big week for Cincinnati sports. The Reds continuing their push for the playoffs. Bengals hoping to bounce back and win their home opener against the Ravens on Sunday. UC Bearcats looking to stay unbeaten against Miami this weekend. First place FC Cincinnati also in action. But before all of the football, American or otherwise, all elite wrestling. It is coming to you live from the Heritage Bank Center tonight. And my guest at this time will be defending his AEW International Championship against Big Bill. Cincinnati's own Jon Moxley joining me here on ESPN 1530. Now, John, I know AEW was just in Cleveland on Saturday. Hopefully you did not stick around to attend the Bengals game on Sunday.
No, I heard about it, though. It sounded pretty bad. Wasn't a good day for football.
Yeah, not in our neck of the woods anyway. I was curious, though. Is there any point in your career where you can kind of equate to what the Bengals are attempting to do this weekend against the Ravens? Big season opener, high expectations. They just went out there and laid an egg collectively as a team. Do you remember a match or a show where, for whatever reason, things didn't go your way? Maybe you were disappointed with your performance. How were you able to kind of put that behind you and learn from it and use it to grow into the performer you are today?
Oh, all the time. And, that's a big part of any sport or any endeavor. Every day that, you come to work like Dynamite, whether you're Tony or whether you're a wrestler or a referee or part of the crew or a part of camera guy or catering or the freaking janitor, whatever it is, every single time, how can we do this better next time? Very in a place where, the only true competition at this point is myself, and I expect a lot of myself. That's why I put myself around people like ECC and stuff where we all expect a lot of each other. I spend very little time patting myself on the back. That's one thing I miss about William Regal here is that, no matter what, you get 15,000 people going nuts. Everybody, when I'm walking to the back, coming up and patting me on the back and flashing camera bulbs at me and everybody telling me I'm the greatest thing in the world, as I'm walking to the back. Regal will just come right up to you and he'll only say one thing. Whatever the worst thing he did is, he'll pick out the tiniest little, don't do this when you grab the hold, like, that just looks like shit, and then you'll be like, oh man, just ruin your whole vibe, but like, that's the thing you take away from it. We do spend time, deciphering what worked, but, just as much time deciphering, what didn't, and always trying to push the envelope and take wrestling in new directions. And then that's usually small stuff, that's not anything overt. And there's a lot of just kind of dogmatic stuff in wrestling that has been done that way for decades. We watch stuff and we go, why are they doing that? I've watched this match since I was a kid 50 times over, but I've never really stopped and asked myself, why are we doing this? It doesn't, when you think about it, it doesn't make any sense, but you just take it for granted that, like, that's what wrestling looks like. I have a bunch of theories on a bunch of stuff that I've been kind of just looking. Some of them I won't even reveal because I'm still figuring them out. But
sounds like there's another book that might be in the works here.
Okay, yeah, that would take some time. Dude, that book takes so much, mental energy and time. And like while I'm talking to you, I'm watching a 2-year-old shuffle through a box of stuffed animals while Miss Rachel's singing EIO on the screen, so I'm multitasking.
Sure.
It's time to do a book with, I can't even imagine that being a reality. Yeah, like, like your phone every once in a while just says software update. And it's basically the same, but it's just like a little better. I feel like that's what we need. Yeah, software update for 2023. Well, a lot of this like playbook that was invented in a different time, in a different era, and we're still using it when we totally don't need it anymore, that we could update things. So that's kind of something that the BCC myself spent a lot of time on, looking at stuff and trying to play around with ways we can do things a little bit differently. And then hopefully, when me and Brian are, old and eating up and in walkers, then like Wheeler can take that on and teach somebody else. And then hopefully 2 or 3 generations from now, somebody else picks up on it and turns it into, something even better. But right now we're just kind of digging around in the dirt, looking for fossils. We're at that point of like creating new stuff.
Jon Moxley, Cincinnati's own, going to be at the Heritage Bank Center tomorrow night for AEW Dynamite. You are going to be putting your international championship on the line against Big Bill. Hell of a card that Tony Khan has put together for this show. Hangman Adam Page is going to be in action. Women's Fatal 4-Way to determine the number 1 contender for Saraya's Women's Championship. Samoa Joe versus Roddy Strong. You're a rock star every time you come back to Cincinnati. I believe this past week, I'm paraphrasing here, but you said, Jon Moxley wrestling in Cincinnati is like Superman fighting on the surface of the sun. Obviously, you get pumped up to perform in the Queen City, but I got to feel like that's especially true this week because in the past month, you've gone from L.A. to Duluth, Georgia to London to Chicago to Indy to Cleveland and now back to Cincinnati. How nice is it to just be able to kind of like stay home for a week after being on the road so much with a 2-year-old nonetheless?
Oh my God, it's best to not have to get on an airplane to go to a show. Like, it's such a treat. If I never get on an airplane again for the rest of my life, that would be fantastic. Or take a really long car drive. I wrestle a pretty physical style and, often take a good beating in the ring. And a lot of stuff I like to do recreationally, is just physical stuff as well. So I live a very physical lifestyle. But, like, nothing to me is worse or does more damage than just the traveling. For years, it was like traveling was my job, The wrestling part was kind of a reward at the end of the day. But, your life becomes traveling at a certain point, in this game. And it's really amazing how that adds up on your body and your joints and stuff. The doctor last year told me that I have the arthritis of a 70-year-old man. And that was quite humbling. That was a year or 2 ago. So by now it's like a 72-year-old man. So I don't move very well in the morning. But once I get thank God shows are at night. Because by then I'm pretty loosened up, If wrestling shows took place in the morning, like Saturday morning Superstars, if we started doing like those early territory style studio TV tapings on like Sunday mornings, I would retire. I'd be done. There's a lot of times I can't even move before noon.
But when you get a week like this and you get to stay home a little bit, do you like to go out and check out the city and enjoy what Cincinnati has to offer, or are you more of a stay at home and get some much needed R&R kind of a guy?
A little bit of both. If it's a place with like a lot of people, like a concert or sporting event or something like that, I'm much more one to stay home and watch that on TV. But I like to just kind of slip into the city and just kind of move around and go largely unnoticed. A lot of the city down here, when I left Cincinnati, traveling the world and just kind of never came back for years, I was like 18 or 19 or whatever. The area over the Rhine was not a place where you would associate with merriment and going to hang out, right?
No, it was not.
But now it's great. They got like bars and coffee shops and restaurants and people, and there's like a lot of just good joy and energy down there. I go running at night a lot of times, or even if I'm like too beat up to run, I'll take out a long walk, jog, or whatever, and I'll go running out into the city and kind of go through the neighborhoods and stuff, and kind of feel the energy of the city. Walk by people coming out of restaurants and smelling the late night pizza and stuff. I really like that. Getting that energy from the city. At any moment, you could be walking out of a pizza place at like midnight and see me like running by. It totally happens. So it feels really good to be back here the last couple of years. It definitely feels like home. So hopefully we can just keep building a new audience here and keep getting more and more people each time to come out and check out the shows when Dynamite comes through and do bigger and bigger shows here. Because I'm still of the opinion it's always been like an underserved wrestling market.
Yeah.
be built into something much bigger.
Yeah, and that was my next question because, tonight, AEW Dynamite, Heritage Bank Center, get your tickets now. That's the go-home show for Grand Slam in New York next Wednesday. Obviously, a lot of stakes on this show, and Tony Khan has done a really good job of putting together this card, and he typically does do a good job of trying to make every show feel as big as possible. But I keep waiting, and I keep wondering, and I know you have no control over this whatsoever, but I keep waiting for a Cincinnati pay-per-view announcement. We haven't had one since 2006. You were IWA Tag Team Champ with Hayden Venson back in 2006. That's how long it's been since Cincinnati has had a pay-per-view. This is a streak that needs to end.
Yeah, I'd be all for that, I would do whatever is necessary. They can parade me around like a show pony and sell tickets if they need to, but I would be all for that. I would like to see that happen.
Now, you have kind of really cemented yourself here as a guy that Tony Khan has been able to really lean on, for lack of a better term, when shit goes wrong. Not everything's going to go according to plan, whether or not it's an injury or otherwise, with AEW over the past couple of years specifically. But every single time it feels like there's an emergency, Tony Khan can break glass and, insert Jon Moxley, and things are going to work out just fine. How much do you pride yourself on being that guy that Tony can call on in a pinch?
Definitely. I think, kind of our thing, we take a lot of pride in our work and our work ethic and our standard that we set ourselves to, and, the way we do the job. To be one of those guys that's like reliable, kind of always there. The downside is it's very, very easy to take you for granted. In the last conversation I had with Vince McMahon, like real conversation, straight up told me, we took you for granted. And that was so much why I was gone. Never talked to him again. It is a tough job because, I got a lot of experience, so a lot of stuff is very familiar to me, and I'm very comfortable doing stuff that a lot of other people might be intimidated by. Like Orange Cassidy pulled off an amazing performance. He lost, but he pulled off an amazing performance in his first ever pay-per-view main event. That was not planned in the weeks out. In fact, everything would have looked completely different. But that's kind of how it's going to go. If you're going to have any success in wrestling, it's very rarely going to go according to plan. You got to be ready to take opportunity when it's there. And when things go awry and the wave changes direction, you got to be able to surf on it and stay on your board. And you got to be able to go with the flow, so to speak. Every big opportunity I've had probably in my career has come completely out of the blue. And, you got to be ready to get your shit together and strike when the iron is hot. And I think Orange Cassidy did that 100%. And being in a main event, that you think, oh, what's the difference? Your matches last instead of second or third. What's the difference? It's a big difference, especially on an AEW pay-per-view, because they're so stacked. And often they're, you count in the 0 hour, whatever, and you're talking about 5 hours of wrestling. And to have to close that show, and I don't have any control over anything else that's on the show prior. And a show in itself is kind of a living work of art in that it has you have to book it with its ebbs and flows and highs and lows. And you can't just be 1,000 miles per hour, foot to the gas pedal matches, 10 matches in a row, because you're going to burn the audience out, both watching at home and in the arena. And you're in the main event, you don't know where the people are going to be at by the time your match is up. Mm-hmm. And often at an AEW pay-per-view, so you got to be able to almost instantly feel where they're at, and they might be taking a breath right now after the last match or two. And you might need to start a little slower and lull them into a sense of relaxation and then pick it back up. If me and Orange Cassidy were in the first match, that match would have looked totally different because it would have been a different scenario. I don't like to plan too much in a situation like that because I want to kind of gauge where we're at and see what we need to do to get them where we're at. Our job is to close strong, so being a pitching closer. That might not always be just run out there at 200 miles an hour.
I was going to say, especially at an AEW show, because I was there at the United Center at All Out, and, Bryan Danielson and Ricky Starks had the greatest strap match of all time, And then I looked at the card and I'm like, there's still 4 more matches after that one.
Yeah, people are telling me that it was like the best 5-match streak in a row of like amazing matches, like a real murderer's row of like great wrestlers, which is an amazing thing to be a part of. And imagine how hard it is to be the last of those, you know. And
exactly.
And I was playing the antagonist, so it wasn't my job to have the whole crowd cheer for me at the end. That was actually Orange Cassidy. So like, that's a lot of pressure on him. He's never been in that situation before. So definitely big props to him. People don't even notice that, when you come out for a main event or at a New Japan or especially an AEW pay-per-view, when you walk out and it's midnight, we have the best fans in the world and they stay crazy all night and they give all their energy. And I love the AEW audience. They're the best crowd in wrestling. But when you come out at midnight, there's a sense in the air that it's midnight. It's like indescribable feeling in the air of like, I know these people have been sitting here for a long time. And if I come out here and start goofing around, they're going to be like, I should go home and beat the traffic, right? So that's a very important spot to be in. I've been there a bunch of times, and I'm actually very comfortable in that spot. It's of no problem with me when all of a sudden they go, hey, you're going to be in the first match and it'll be really easy, but we actually need you to be in the main event. Cool, totally. I'm totally comfortable in that spot. I enjoy that and I thrive in that kind of at the last minute, all of a sudden, everything is now up to you and you have to take the game-winning shot. I'm very calm in that situation. So if I can take somebody else along with me and let them experience hitting that game-winning shot at the buzzer kind of thing so that they can take that skill and then go on and use it themselves for the betterment of the show and the fans, or give that skill to somebody else, that's a joy to be able to do. So I really like the position that I'm in.
Another one of these guys that Tony Khan can lean on is your Blackpool Combat Club mate, Bryan Danielson, who, again, pinch hitting a month early, coming back from injury with one of the cleanest breaks I've ever seen of a right forearm, and puts together the greatest strap match of all time. He announced on Saturday that his career is actually winding down within the next year. I'm not a huge fan of the greatest of all time discussions because I feel like pro wrestling is far too nuanced to even begin to nail down like a top 5 list or anything like that. And I know you told Sports Illustrated that the late, great Terry Funk gets the crown as the greatest to ever do it. But I am curious to, where you believe Bryan Danielson falls on that list, because since making the move to AEW, I feel like he has put together a body of work that firmly solidifies his involvement with any conversation of who the greatest of all time is.
Oh, 100%. And like yourself, I'm not a big fan of the who's the greatest of all time comparisons, because very often you're talking apples and oranges. Mm-hmm. And what are we talking about? What criteria are you using? Like,
sure,
who drew the most money or sold the most tickets, or who had the best matches, which is completely subjective, because I don't care how everybody else. If everybody else says match A is the best, but I just happen to like B better, then you can't really tell me that A is better than B if I just like B better, And in that last interview, I made the comparison. That's an easy one to make. Is like, how can you say who's better between Ric Flair and Bret Hart? Because they both wrestled completely different styles and approached the game in totally different ways. That as a wrestler, that might make more sense than it is to a fan, but it's like comparing apples and oranges and just saying, like, what is the best fruit ever? And it's like, I don't know, man, bananas, you can cut it up and put it on peanut butter, and put apples, you slice that bitch up and like make a candy apple out of it and put it on one of them salads from Wendy's. Oh man, they're so different. How do you compare? And even if you're talking about like money and stuff, where you're talking about two different eras where the technology of how people viewed wrestling was different, and inflation and the economy and everything. It's like everything is impossible to compare fairly, right? But off the top of my head right now, I have 3 GOATs, greatest of all time. I kind of hate using the word GOAT. I feel like everybody uses it.
Yep.
And they're all equal stature, because they're all 3 the greatest of all time in completely different ways for completely different reasons. Obviously, Terry Funk, I don't see how you can call him anything but like the greatest to ever do it. And, he's just so inherently Terry Funk and so versatile. And so Terry Funk was not playing wrestler. Terry Funk was 100% real about everything he was doing, and all the choices that he made and in the ring and everything he did. And there'll just never be another one quite like him. Like Terry Funk is just the man. So and the other two I work with currently, one being Chris Jericho, who in his own way, I think is the greatest of all time because he just has this ability to be there and in the mix and important and a big star at like these pivotal times, and he can hang and deliver in any situation. He's almost like a time traveler of wrestling. You know, he was in the 90s junior heavyweight scene, Super J Cup and all that in New Japan. And he was in WCW when it was cool. He was at ECW in the mid-90s and like 96 when it was at its coolest. He was in WWF when it was like as most stacked as it's ever been, like 2000 or so. And then through the whole, you know, Vince era of WWE, he was around and a player. Now today in AEW, and he was in New Japan when New Japan business all of a sudden kicks off really big. And now he's here in AEW, you know, and you see him mixing it up with guys of all shapes and sizes and styles, right? So he's got this like time traveling ability. So then other guys of his generation, you know, they had big runs there, like what, 2 or 3 years? Mm-hmm. And Jericho's going on like 20 something. When the story of Jericho is going to be written at the end, it's just going to be ridiculous. So in his own way, I consider him a greatest of all time. And Brian, the point of the question, I consider maybe just the greatest pro wrestler that ever lived, which is a very humbling thing to be able to say that I get to be tag partners with him occasionally and work with him. And to have somebody like that on your side to bounce ideas off of or to play that regal role and tell you this sucked or whatever or change that, that's an immense tool that I don't take for granted that I have in my toolbox that I get to pick his brain. Brian is like the greatest pure pro wrestler of all time. If you just picked him up and stuck him in any ring in the world, whether it be the parking lot of a auto parts store in Tijuana or the Tokyo Dome or the main event of WrestleMania or AEW Dynamite, you put him in any ring against any opponent with no context whatsoever and just ring the bell. Anybody watching, he will suck into that match and they will feel like they're watching a real struggle and be just completely sucked into this match for the duration of it against anybody, anywhere, anytime. He's just like the most perfect, pure pro wrestler that I think has ever lived. And I've taken a great deal of influence and inspiration from him, as I'm sure many pro wrestlers have. You know, I find it hard to imagine a world where a healthy Bryan Danielson stops wrestling at all. But I do think he will definitely be, I think he's 100% serious when, you know, he wants to wind it down and not be wrestling as frequently and be on the road and be away from his kids and so forth every week. I 100% buy that. It's true. I find it hard to imagine like him actively being like healthy and deciding he's for sure never going to wrestle again. I find that hard to imagine. Not saying it couldn't happen, but we've seen people be here one day and their careers are over the next. Mm-hmm. And I could go out there and get chokeslammed by Big Bill through the freaking ring and not get up, and you can never see me wrestle again. So every time you get to see these greats wrestle, you know, Terry Funk was here a couple of weeks ago. Now he's not. You know, so anytime you get to see these greats wrestle, you should really, really stop and pause and think of how fortunate you are to be seeing this. You know, because once Michael Jordan retires, you can't turn on the TV and watch Michael Jordan play basketball anymore. You got a chance to see Bryan Danielson wrestle on Dynamite, you know, stop and pause and really enjoy it, you know, while it's here, because you're watching something really special.
Look, I mean, whether it's Bryan Danielson or it's Edge or anybody who was able to come back from a what we thought at the time was a career-ending injury, I don't take any match I get to watch them in for granted, period, whether it's on television or in the crowd. But I appreciate the time as always, man. We'll catch up down the line.
Hey, totally, man. Anytime.